You had questions. We have, well, some answers. If ever there was a season with plenty of questions, it is this one for the Nashville Predators. Today, we're going to tackle topics around coaching and the future. Plus, we'll tell you the one thing we really want to see in tonight's rematch against the Anaheim Ducks.
You're Locked On Predators, your daily podcast on the Nashville Predators, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy game day, everyone. Welcome to the Locked On Predators podcast. Thanks for making us your first listen of the day. We are a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Want to kick off this episode, giving a shout out to our Locked On Predators insiders and to our everydayers who are tuning in each and every Monday through Friday to talk Nashville Predators hockey with us. I am Ann Kimmel. I'm a writer and co-host with Penalty Box Radio, and my friends, I have a partner in crime.
You do. I'm Emma Lingen, and I'm the Predators site editor and reporter for the Hockey News.
Well, it has been a season with a lot of questions and maybe not nearly as many answers as one would think. On today's show, Emma and I are going to try to answer some of yours. We sent the call out for a mailbag episode. You all flooded the inbox with some great questions. This is going to be part one of a two-part mailbag episode. Today, we are going to focus on questions about coaching and Nashville's future. Plus, Nashville's going to get another shot at the Anaheim Ducks. We're going to tell you what needs to be different this time around. Before we dive into all of this, do want to let you know today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Emma, we have said it before and we will say it again. This season is a mystery wrapped up in a conundrum with a side of a broken Rubik's Cube, surrounded by a jigsaw puzzle missing pieces. Like, it is going to take so much to deconstruct what our eyes have seen and our hearts have felt. But here we are. You and I are going to take a shot at it. We sent out the word, hey, if you have some questions, we want to do a mailbag episode. Flooded with questions. A lot of the same questions, some different questions. We're going to cover a variety of topics in a two-parter. We're going to get to a lot of coaching discussion today, and then we've got some other stuff, off-season topics for tomorrow's show we want to cover. We're going to kick it off with a question from Twitter, and this is the question. Is Andrew Brunette related to Barry Trotz? What has to happen for him to be fired? If Trotz won't do it, who will fire him? Now, first of all, let me just tackle the one I know. As far as we know, we have not gone into ancestry DNA, but as far as we know, they are not actually related. But I understand the spirit of the question. And so we're going to tackle the spirit of the question. Andrew Brunette has had a pretty long leash. What has to happen for him to be fired, Emma? What do you think is going to be some of the factors that Barry Trotz weighs this offseason? And if Barry Trotz opts not to fire him, would ownership maybe step in?
I don't see ownership stepping in, quite frankly, because that's just not how it usually goes in hockey, to be honest. Again, it would have to be something really egregious for that to happen. Now, we've said this before for those who, are regular listeners, that we think that someone needs to fall on the sword for the just complete awfulness that was this past season. Is it all Brunette's fault? Probably not, but that's the most likely candidate. And I think that Barry Trotz, I understand he's a coach by nature. It's his guy that he picked. He doesn't want to, firing Brunette is essentially Barry Trotz saying, hey,
oops,
I was wrong. My bad. Which, I understand. I genuinely don't think that Barry Trotz has too much pride to do that. He does not strike me as someone who has that pride. I think if anything were holding him back, it wouldn't be his pride. It would be him wanting to do right by Brunette.
Mhm.
I just think, again, I don't know how many times I need to say this. Firing him now gets you nothing. Absolutely
Yep.
nothing. Just let him finish the season at this point. It's fine. And again, you don't want to fire him until or unless you know you have someone ready to go. That was the same thing that happened with John Hines and eventually Andrew Brunette. Barry wasn't going to fire Hines until he knew that Bruno was on board. And so that's how he's going to approach this too. You don't just fire a coach and not have a plan in place.
Gosh, no.
And so I think that the only way that Brunette gets fired, I'm not saying that when I say it that way, it sounds like it's unlikely. I really don't know. At this point, I genuinely feel 50-50 about it, but I'm
Mhm.
the only way it does happen is if that there is a plan in place for who is going to replace him. You don't fire him and then say, "Ah, we'll figure it out later." Like
Right.
that's not how it's gonna go. So I I do think, Barry was non-committal about Brunette and his future the last time he was asked about it on 1025. Again, I think that's normal. I think people are going to read into that what they want to read into it. I guess the good thing is that he wasn't fully, this is my guy. He's not going anywhere. Like he was non-committal about it. He wasn't, he didn't seem like he wasn't going to bring him back for sure, but he just kind of let it breathe there. So I think
Yeah.
that that tells me that he acknowledges that firing Brunette is an option. And at this point, you just need to know that he knows that it's an option, and it's one that he has to consider.
Yeah. I love what you say about Barry Trotz not having so much pride that he has to be right. And I think it's important for people to hear that because what Barry Trotz wants most is not to be right, it is to win a Stanley Cup for Nashville. I truly believe that. I don't think Barry Trotz is like, I'm going to ride or die with Andrew Brunette so I don't look bad. I don't think that's true. I don't think that's why he hasn't fired him this season. I think there have been enough other factors that you could say have been a hitch in the giddy up for this team, that it is not just solely, strictly all on coaching. And I agree with you. It all comes down to the fact that there are logistics. It's not even about the vibes. It's not about necessarily even win losses. It's about logistics. And if you don't have your next guy, you don't fire your coach. So I absolutely agree with you. And I will say this, I don't think Barry Trotz, I don't think it's a pride issue. I know a lot of people have said that, like he's not going to want to admit he was wrong. Look, he's a first-time general manager. Everybody knows he's going to, make mistakes. He knows he's going to make mistakes. General managers, David Poyle made mistakes after 20 years. I don't think it's that so much as the most important thing to him is winning a Stanley Cup. And how does he see that happening? So, we'll wait to see. Great question from YouTube, kind of along the same lines. It seems like the team can't build on previous coaching points. Is there an obvious kind of disconnect between what the coaches are preaching and what the players are doing? And when I read this question, Emma, I have to tell you, for me, the disconnect is not so much between coaches and players as for me, it is between Barry Trotz and Andrew Brunette in the sense that Andrew Brunette was brought in to develop a team that was going to be focused on this youth movement. And when I watch him bench Luke Evangelista and Spencer Stasny, I struggle to see a coach who knows how to lead young players into their best performance. And I'm not saying I'm necessarily right. I'm saying it doesn't make sense to me. It's not a good look. You and I have talked about that. There are some bad optics this season. This is one of them. So for me, that's the biggest disconnect. I don't know that I can pinpoint a disconnect between what Andrew Brunette wants and what the players are doing. I feel like they understand it. I think it's execution. Would you agree, or do you feel like there is something missing in between players and coaches?
Yeah, I don't think it's a lack of understanding on the
Mhm.
players' part. I don't think that the coaches are asking them to do anything that they don't in like on principle know how to do. I think it is, going back to my conversation I had earlier in the year with Steven Stamkos about it. He said it. He's like, the system isn't challenging, like objectively speaking. It's not that hard. It's not rocket science. It's not like
Mhm.
they're asking them to do anything crazy hard. It's just so different. And so, again, it's not, something is, I don't think that it is a disconnect that's, something's getting lost in translation. I
Mhm.
think they're understanding it, but it's just the doing it that is the hardest part.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think it's about execution and not comprehension. But man, you would think the execution would be better at this point in the season. But friends, here we are. Let's just acknowledge where we are. Coming up, we are going to look into the future and tell you what qualities will matter most in a head coach in Nashville, regardless of who that person may or may not be. And plus, what are we going to see a few seasons down the road when it comes to system and roster matching?
Did you know getting a good night's sleep is the number one recipe for long-term success in life? I didn't. It took me way longer to realize than I'd like to admit. It was years of tossing and turning. I was always tired. I never felt like I could live up to my potential, but not anymore. Thanks to Bear Mattress. I used their sleep quiz and I matched with the Elite Hybrid. It's perfect for side sleepers like me. Now I wake up energized. I'm getting deeper sleeps and I'm ready to attack the day. No matter how you sleep, Bear Mattress has a match for you with a focus on recovery, cooling, and pressure relief to upgrade your sleep and improve your overall quality of life. Go to bearmattress.com and use promo code LOCKEDONNHL at checkout for 40% off site-wide. This offer is not available anywhere else. You have to use my promo code on the very last page of checkout to get this discount. That's bearmattress.com and use promo code LOCKEDONNHL for 40% off site-wide. Bearmattress.com, promo code LOCKEDONNHL.
All right, Emma. So we are talking about questions. We're trying to provide answers in a very nebulous season. I love this question from one of our insiders, John. John asks, if the Predators do move on from Andrew Brunette, what are the most important qualities for the new head coach? What's on your short list, Emma?
Well, it's hard, I think that it needs to, I've said this before, that I think it needs to be someone who's done this before.
Mhm.
With this particular roster, if you're trying to get the most out of the guys that you have right now, you want someone who's done it before, but also someone who sees the big picture, I think, and that involves getting the young players involved and not relying too much on like a select handful of players, like trying to get all four lines going, things like that. Like, I think it's understanding what each player brings to the table, and they're all different. They all have their own unique skills that make them play unique roles on the team, and that includes the veterans and the young guys. And it is, I mean, it's much easier said than done. I don't pretend, I'm not pretending to act like it's easy here, but I think that someone who can reach the veterans and the youth and not just one or the other.
And I think that's actually very challenging because a lot of times, if you are making a coaching change, it can be because you are a contender who isn't performing up to where you should be. So you have a roster of veterans, players, typically, I'm not saying always, but typically you have a roster with some experience if you are a roster in sort of a contention window. Flip side of that is you are a team that is in a rebuild. And so you are going to be coaching like some younger players and developing them at the NHL level, which again, we've said the NHL is not a development league, but you know what? Sometimes it has to be. Sometimes it has to be. And to find somebody who can do both, that's tough. You really have to be there has to be a unique skill set to be able to get the most out of a veteran like a Steven Stamkos or a Roman Josi and get the most out of a Fedor Svechkov and a Luke Evangelista. I think you absolutely hit the nail on the head. And I've said this before, and I will say it again. I am a huge Carl Taylor fan, and I would love for Carl Taylor to coach the Nashville Predators. He was interviewed along with Andrew Brunette and one other person who we don't know. The coaching of the veterans for me is kind of the maybe this isn't the right timing for Carl Taylor, but look, I think he's a fantastic coach. I'm just curious. I'm just throwing this out. This is me asking a nosy question, Emma. Do you have anybody that you're like, I wouldn't mind seeing that person come in and coach?
I mean, yes, but it would never happen. It would literally never happen.
Tell me who. I have somebody too.
I love Paul Maurice. I think Paul Maurice is amazing. I also wouldn't mind seeing like a Mike Sullivan, for example.
That is me. I would love to see Mike Sullivan here.
Yeah. I think Mike Sullivan, see, Paul Maurice was more of a selfish answer because like he just seems like a hoot and a half to interview. And
oh my gosh, media wise, 100%.
A dream. But yeah, content for days. But I think that Mike Sullivan has that kind of unique, he can reach the veterans, but also reach the young kids. Mm-hmm. The thing with that, though, again, I think like Sidney Crosby, Chris Letang, those guys like have been very vocal about how much they like Mike Sullivan. So as long as those guys like Mike Sullivan, I don't know that he's going anywhere, but I could be wrong. So
that's kind of my sneak pick. Like, and again, I've said it before, I love Carl Taylor. I will follow Carl Taylor's coaching path wherever it takes him because I really do think he's he's an exceptional coach, very good at developing talent. But man, little Mike Sullivan, I'd be interested. Let's move on to another question from Lee, one of our insiders. This is such an interesting question. I really had to spend some time thinking about this. Speculating on the Preds 5 years from now, Emma, and dependent on the current youth that we know of that are in the system, would we rather have Bruno's progressive system or maybe a more simple traditional system for the Predators team?
I just think that there can be elements of it, you know? I think there can be elements of both. I don't think it needs to be all one or the other. I think it is hard when you don't have like the superstar player on your roster that, you know, you don't have a Nathan McKinnon, you don't have a Connor McDavid that can kind of where you build an offensive system around that guy. Like they just don't have that. So, you know, I think that even just putting it in two categories like traditional and progressive is way oversimplifying it. I think that there's a lot to unpack. There's a lot of nuance there, but I do think that there can be elements of, again, the comprehension of the progressive stuff. It's not an issue, but I think what is the issue is that when you have all these veterans right now and you don't want to commit to a full rebuild. Now, this is not me saying that I think they should have commit to a full rebuild because I'm still not there yet, but I think if that's the path you've chosen, we're not talking about whether it's the right path or not. We're just saying that is the path that they've chosen of doing this sort of retool on the fly, not a competitive rebuild, or I'm sorry, not a full rebuild. Then that is not the time to bring in such a different system. Because if the system is that unique you want your players coming up, developing, learning this system, like from the time they are little baby sprouts and they're young and malleable and still can kind of become, because it's easier than trying to have Brady Shea unlearn everything he's ever learned about playing defense. Like it's, I don't know if I'm making any sense, but I think that when you have going with this sort of avant-garde coaching system with Andrew Brunette might have made more sense with a full rebuild team.
I see what you're saying. Yeah.
But I don't know that it is like, I see the idea, but I just don't know that in execution that it's the best thing here.
That's a really, I like that. I like that answer. I think that's a great answer. And I hadn't thought about it that way. For me, and just one of the things I want to throw out is that it is interesting to me, and I don't know if people know this or not, but what Nashville does at the NHL level is very similar. Like the AHL team, the Milwaukee Admirals, they mimic it because their job is to prepare players to pop into the NHL lineup. But it's interesting to me because there has been so much talk about Andrew Brunette making adjustments. What, are those adjustments made at the AHL level? And how much do you want to have to adjust your system? I don't know. I go back and forth on that. For me, when I look at the guys that have been drafted recently that are kind of going to be the players that you're looking at for, 5 years from now. And the one that pops out to me is Igor Surin, who is one of the most delightful sprouts. If you're talking about delightful sprout, just delightful. But I look at him and he is not a player I look at and go, that guy is all speed and he is going to be great, because speed is a big part of what you have to play with for Brunette's system to really be most effective. And it seems like Barry Trotz likes guys whose motor is always going. And I don't necessarily think that means speed. I think that means hard to play against and always getting involved and all of that kind of stuff. So for me, I don't know that 5 years from now, they are very specifically drafting a team that's going to be like Lightning McQueens that are going to be great for this. So I also think, and we've said this a million times, you coach the players you have, not the players you wish you had. So, that's on Barry Trotz hiring coaching. That's on the coach adjusting his coaching. Coming up, we have more questions to talk about. We are going to make a Stanley Cup prediction. Oh, Emma and I, we really do hate doing that. Also, want to talk about one defensive prospect. Will we be seeing a new face on the blue line at the NHL level next year? Today's episode is brought to you by our great friends at FanDuel. March Madness is here. It's my favorite time of the year, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. That is 200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories, and even who is going to cut down those nets. The FanDuel app is simple to use, and when you win, you're going to get paid instantly. There is no waiting around. So visit FanDuel.com and get in on the college hoops action all tournament long.
The NCAA tournament is here, and so is the Bracket Breakdown.
Locked On Podcast Network and Amazon Fire TV channels are teaming up to deliver NCAA tournament coverage like never before. Watch studio shows featuring former players and Locked On's local experts as they guide you through every upset, buzzer beater, and bracket matchup.
Stream it all for free on Amazon Fire TV channel. Search Bracket Breakdown to see it all for free.
It's your team every day.
All right, Emma, we are answering mailbag questions. Man, we got a lot of them. I felt like Harry Potter with all the owls flying in and dropping stuff off in the Great Hall. One of the questions that we had came up about Tanner Molendyk. This is a name that most people are familiar with. Of course, Tanner Molendyk was drafted by the Nashville Predators in 2023, 24th overall pick. This guy is something special. So the question is, will we see Tanner Molendyk next year at the NHL level? And would you consider him more an offensive or defensive defenseman? So let's talk about Tanner Molendyk. And before we get into like offensive or defensive defensemen and when will we see him, this is what I want you all to know. If you have an opportunity over the summer to come to rookie camp or to come to training camp, watch Tanner Molendyk during skating drills with the skating coach, Jackie. It's literally, I don't even know how to put into words how one of these things is not like the other. It's just incredible. He is incredible. You're like, where's the triple Lutz? Triple Saukow. Like his skating is mesmerizing. You almost can't not watch it. And he does it so effortlessly. So I'm just throwing it out there. If you get a chance to watch Tanner Molendyk at a practice, just watch his skating. It'll knock your socks off. But when you think about Molendyk, think about his trajectory. Emma, do you think we're going to see him at the NHL level next year?
I think that depends on what the team is doing next year. I think it depends on how the Predators are doing next year, because in an ideal world, you don't need him at the NHL level next year. Now, could we see him get his little, his 9-game audition or whatever it is without burning up his ELC? Of course. But I think that, now he's 20 years old. So when he's done with Medicine Hat, he's going to go to Milwaukee. You want to see how he does in Milwaukee first. Like, let's walk before we run here. And as far as offensive versus defensive, I think, again, there's a little more nuance to that. Mm-hmm. He is not a strictly defensive defense, but he's not Luke Shen. He's not.
Yes. Yeah.
But he is also not Roman Josi. He is going to generate a lot of offense, but I would say he's more of he kickstarts the rush. He's going to be dishing the puck to the forwards or to whoever is going to be scoring the goals. You look at his point totals, from his junior career, that he's going to be a lot more assists than goals. Mm-hmm. And so he's definitely a piece on the offense for sure, but he is not, he's not the finisher. He's more of the playmaker.
Yeah. I would agree with that. It's such an interesting question. Are we going to see him at the NHL level? Because I thought he and Andrew Gibson really pushed a conversation with training camp in their performance, and they played together. They also played together at World Juniors as well. Interesting little fun fact. They played together, and they are very complementary. Their game is very complementary. But like you said, he's got to finish his season in Medicine Hat. Medicine Hat could be a long postseason for them. And then you go into, well, how much time would he get in the AHL? And remember, every transition is a leap. And look, Tanner Molendyk, knock your socks off. This is somebody who is an NHL caliber player. He is ranked as Nashville's top prospect. But you gotta grow as you go. And so I think it would be interesting to see, like, how many games would he get perhaps in the postseason with Milwaukee, and what does his summer look like? I don't know. It's interesting too, because Barry Trotz talked about, like, hey, I have to address the defense. Clearly we have a problem defensively. One of those problems is we haven't seen Jeremy Lauzon for a long, long time, which breaks my heart. He does still exist, you all. Roman Josi, of course, out. Don't know that we're going to see him back this season. Still kind of waiting to see. So you haven't had a full picture of Nashville's actual defense for a really long time to say, these are the pieces that are going to work together. I would not be shocked if we saw Tanner Molendyk next season in the NHL at some point. I don't necessarily think he is going to hit the ground running game one of the regular season and play an 82-game season with the Predators. He's extraordinary, but that's a big leap. It's a big leap. But yeah, he's somebody who I feel very confident he is going to be a regular NHLer for the Nashville Predators. And again, just chef's kiss skating, you all. It's like Spencer Stasny skating got even prettier. Like, I know it's hard to imagine, but just it's unholy. Real quick question to wrap up part 1 of our mailbag, Emma, putting you on the spot. You know, Emma and I have too much anxiety for these questions, but here we are doing the will of the people. Who's going to win the Stanley Cup, Emma?
So I will definitely eat crow and say that my preseason pick is not panning out well at all. My preseason pick was Edmonton, and I
Same.
will, that me on that. We're just not, but it's hard when I look at the teams that are in it. Like, who would I like to see win it? Like, who do I think would be the
You can
realistic
answer
fun
both of
option?
those. Who's the fun option, and who do you think is the realistic option?
I
Our show,
think
our rules.
I think the fun option is Washington. I think that they've had an excellent year. And I think that I really like Spencer Carberry as a coach. I
Yeah.
think that he's gotten a lot out of these players. And, there would be the icing on the cake for Alex Ovechkin, all of that. And so I think that would be the fun option. Realistic option, I hate to say it, but I think it's going to be Florida again.
I do too. And I'm here to mix it up. I like a little
really
something else.
I don't really have anything against Florida, with the exception being they have the most annoying goal song in the entire league. But other than that, I really don't have, it's not that I actively don't want to see them succeed, but I'm more of like it's the same reason I wasn't rooting for the Chiefs in the Super Bowl. I'm like,
Yeah.
you've had your fun. Let's give someone else a turn.
Well, that and Sam Bennett lives in my invisible backpack of hockey gritches right now, so he's going to be unavailable for the postseason. But I'm with you. I really think Florida is going to be very, very good. I mean, okay, if Washington wins, it's a fun story. Alex Ovechkin, kind of breaks Gretzky's, thing, and then goes on and wins the Stanley Cup. Fun team for me, and I have no reason to say this because I don't particularly like some of the players on this roster, but Ottawa, what are you doing? Who are you? Where'd you come from? It's literally like the movie She's All That, where you're like, no, you're the weird art student who all of the sudden is beautiful. What?
Yeah. Ottawa's been fun. I don't think this is their year. But I think that they have, they've taken the next step in their timeline, and I think that's good for them.
Yeah. Be interesting to see. Yeah. I don't think it's going to be Edmonton.
No.
And they were my pick too. A little bit sad about that because, I live the horror of Matthias Ekholm's final seconds in Game 7 of last year's Stanley. It just haunts me, you all. I just want good things for Eki. That is going to wrap up part 1 of our mailbag episode. Like I said, you all had some great questions. On tomorrow's show, we are going to tackle off-season moves. What should Barry Trotz do in the offseason? And we're going to talk about that elusive center. For the love of God, where can the Nashville Predators get one of those? We're going to talk about that on tomorrow's show. Emma, before we log off today, will you let everyone know where they can find you and your work?
You can find me on social media at Emma_Lingen, and you can find my work at the Hockey News.
And you can find my work with Penalty Box Radio. You can find me on social media at AnnK_Mama on Ice. Friends, that is going to do it for part 1 of our mailbag episode. Thank you so much for making us your first listen of the day. We are going to be back tomorrow, dispensing wisdom as best we can about this team and answering your questions. We look forward to seeing you then.